Two of the biggest brands in college football, but also two of the hottest teams riding a combined 17-game winning streak into the Rose Bowl. Talking USC and Penn State with Tim Aydin from Black Shoe Diaries from SB Nation, jumping on board here. Tim, so this is pretty amazing because we talked about before we came on and hit the record button. The last time we talked was setting up the Pitt game. You lose that one after getting behind. You go to Michigan, and it was just a complete annihilation, 49-10. So who in the world would have thought that football team coming off completely outclassed by Michigan in Ann Arbor, 9 weeks later, Big Ten champions, having run the gamut, Ohio State, a good Iowa team, Michigan State, Wisconsin, coming back from 3 touchdowns down in Indianapolis and being the Big Ten champs. It's amazing.
Yeah, I definitely would never have thought of it. You and I told you this before you hit record, but I was actually serving as a groomsman at a good friend's wedding during the Michigan game. And, I just remember we were watching it before the wedding started, and we watched it quickly get to a 21-zip Michigan first quarter. And, we're all like, all right, this is bad. Let's just get on with the wedding kind of thing. And of course we watched some of it afterwards too. And just, I never would have thought back then that we would be in a position where we are. I mean, I was just hoping we would maybe get 6-7 wins, go to another bowl game, and just, hopefully next year with a more mature roster, we would having this kind of season that we're having right now. Like, in my opinion, this team is a year ahead as far as the kind of success they're having. And yeah, I'd say you've talked to my colleague Ellie Moretta Felice a few times, and optimistic by far of our Black Shoe Diaries colleagues, and even he wouldn't have thought we'd have this kind of success this year. So, I mean, they really defied everyone's expectations.
Tim, if football coaches could kind of gather the magic formula, they would do it. They're constantly trying to figure out the right chemistry. How do we get this team to play together? How do we get this unit to come together as a team and be able to believe in itself? And after losing to Pitt and Michigan, I don't know what happened, but like we talked about just a few minutes ago before we came on, that Minnesota game was key. It was a quality opponent in Happy Valley, could have easily lost the game, made some huge plays in the clutch to get it to overtime and win that game against a quality opponent. And then it just continued from there against Iowa, completely thrashed the Hawkeyes, and we've seen what Iowa's capable of since then. That somehow this young team that had no track record of winning these kind of games suddenly believed in itself and was able to pull out games against quality teams, and Ohio State obviously being the benchmark of those kind of efforts.
Just to go back, I know we had talked about this as well before we hit record about the Minnesota game, but I do want to correct myself. I think the real turning point was when they came out in the second half. They were trailing 13-3 against Minnesota, 2-2 team. Supposedly the students were starting to grumble a bit about the coaching staff and whatnot. But then, I think early third quarter, it's just a run-of-the-mill pass play. But McSorley fires a bullet down the middle to Irvin Charles, redshirt freshman, who catches it, breaks a tackle, and just races 50 yards to the end zone. And that suddenly brought the crowd alive. It's a 3-point game. And, from there, Penn State and Minnesota kind of traded blows. And, Penn State came up with a few more clutch plays, including on the final drive where, McSorley completed a pass to Chris Godwin on a 3rd and long off his back foot, and then later scrambled about 20 yards from midfield to set up the game-time field goal by Tyler Davis. And then that went into overtime, and I'm sure most of you who follow college football probably know how it ended by now. Saquon Barkley ran 25 yards on Penn State's first play to the end zone and walk-off touchdown. But I think that started to have a carryover effect, though, because the following week when Maryland came to town, this is the Maryland team at the time. I know we forget this now because they're 6-6, but they were 4-0, and they had been dominating their opponents for the most part, even though it was kind of a crappy schedule. But they were 4-0 and definitely looking much better than they had the last couple of years. And so they come to town, and then Penn State opening drive, they just march right down the field, score a touchdown, and then just come back and kind of hit Maryland in the mouth. And I think around it was really in the second half is when Penn State really took charge. But they fed off that confidence they had built from coming back against Minnesota to beat down Maryland 38-14. But I'd say the second point, I won't say a turning point, but the part where they really started to build, I think, was the Ohio State game. Especially when that go ahead, the block 6 as we all call it now. That just I told you this too before we hit record, but I was there at the game, and just the electricity in the stadium when that happened was something I hadn't experienced in a while. I saw grown people cry. That's how magical it was. But that also gave them an extra confidence boost, which they then used to, bowl over Purdue. They put up 62 points on Purdue. They, steamrolled a decent Iowa team at home right after destroying Purdue. And then they followed it up with a game at Indiana where, they were tested, and they lost. At that point, they lost a few key guys in the offensive line to injury, and Brendan Mahan, Andrew Nelson, and Paris Palmer. And the O-line was looking a little shaky, but then, Trace McSorley's arm kind of brought them back into it. They ended up coming back from a 10-point deficit in the second half to win that. And then with, beating down Rutgers, and then following week, of course, they destroy Michigan State at home the same day that Ohio State beats Michigan, which puts Penn State in the Big Ten championship, which then, of course, led to the incredible comeback to win the Big Ten.
Tim, when I see Trace McSorley and I saw his first effort against Georgia in the bowl game in relief of Christian Hackenberg, I saw a guy that even if I could have envisioned success, I would have thought the success would have been, okay, this is a guy that's elusive. He can get away from the rush. He's completely different than Hackenberg. He brings that dimension with a porous offensive line that you need to kind of help a struggling offense where he can make the defense respect the run. He can move around. He can do those things, but he's gonna throw the ball around, and it's gonna be intermediate at best. It's not gonna be a deep passing game. He doesn't have an NFL kind of arm, and still probably doesn't have the classic Hackenberg kind of arm. But because of the wide receiver core being so good, so talented, big and physical, it was a great combination of what he was able to do. Throwing the ball downfield, he just chucks it up there, and he's got no fear. He trusts his receivers. He throws it accurately downfield, so it's not a cannon, but it's accurate downfield throwing, and it's just proven to be, all of a sudden, you've got an explosive passing game.
Well, I think you nailed it right there, Mark. He's not, he doesn't have Hackenberg caliber arm, but he's pretty fearless about chucking it downfield, and you can tell it doesn't quite have the zip on it that Hack's deep passes did, but his receivers are talented enough to adjust to the ball and make the big play. So you saw that on full display in the Big Ten championship game when there were a couple instances where he hit Sight Blacknell for back-to-back touchdowns, which suddenly erased a 28-7 deficit to a 28-21 early third quarter, and suddenly Wisconsin fans are thinking, what's going on here? So I think he ended up throwing almost 400 yards in that game, and a good chunk of them were just him just heaving it up and letting Sight Blacknell or Chris Godwin or Deshaun Hamilton just come down with it. Mike Gesicki also had a big game there. So I think it's just a matter of complete trust in each other, and that's also how this whole streak started. I think you can tell. I think the biggest difference between this year's team and the previous two teams James Franklin coached is that there's a complete buy-in from everybody. The players trust each other. They trust their coaching staff. Because this is pretty much Franklin's team now. Only the seniors and the fifth-year seniors were there for Bill O'Brien. The other ones only know Coach Franklin. So that wasn't the case last year, especially 2 years ago when you had, the seniors on that team were on their third head coach. So it's been a real key, which I guess it's been talked about more and more lately, but that's something that wasn't mentioned enough early on. But they're all on the same page and they all believe in each other. And you see it with the way McSorley just fearlessly chucks it up for his receivers. But also another key thing with McSorley's surgence was the coaching staff started to design a few runs for him to keep defenses a little more honest. I saw it especially in the Maryland game when, at that point teams are starting. Minnesota the week before had pretty much shut down Saquon Barkley except for, his. But they started to design a few runs for McSorley, and it really caught Maryland off guard. He, broke off some big gains, on third and long was at least expecting to take off. And that in turn opened things up for Barkley to now they also do respect McSorley's legs and not just zero in on Saquon. But of course teams still tend to do that, in which case McSorley's more than happy to make them pay with his arm. So I feel like now it's a pick your poison type thing for opposing defenses.
Tim Aydin joining us from Black Shoe Diaries, the SB Nation platform for Penn State athletics. Of course, the Nittany Lions preparing for USC in the Rose Bowl. Tim, despite the success against a pretty difficult schedule, most notably against Iowa, Wisconsin, and Ohio State down the stretch, the concerns that you had early in the season, offensive line most notably, some issues on defense, injuries at the time, the team has gotten a little bit more healthy. Are those the same concerns, despite winning all these games, the same concerns you have lining up against USC, that maybe the offensive line isn't what you need it to be?
We're missing a few we're missing two of our starters, Brennan Mahan and Andrew Nelson. They were game one starters this year, both upperclassmen, both redshirt juniors. And then we also lost Paris Palmer, who was another key part of the rotation. Unfortunately, his eligibility is out, so he won't be back. But Mahan and Nelson potentially can. It does. You certainly want to have all your best linemen available for a game like this. But that being said, the offensive line has done a great job of adjusting without those guys. It's kind of been a next man up sort of mentality. So now you've got redshirt freshman Steven Gonzalez starting at left guard. Ryan Bates, another redshirt freshman, was starting there since game one this year, but they moved him to left tackle after Paris Palmer went down. And then Connor McGovern, a true freshman, he's on at right tackle. So they've had a lot of great young talent stepping up on the O-line in place of some of the injured, experienced guys. So that's helped. And I think I'm sure Ellie has credited enough times too, but Matt Limegrover, the offensive line coach, he's been a real boon as far as developing this unit's concerned. They seem more cohesive. They do a better job holding their blocks. They're still shaky at times, but it's not the cluster that we were used to seeing the last couple of years under Herb Hand. And of course, we talk about Joe Moorhead all the time, the offensive coordinator, but it's also Matt Limegrover should be getting a lot of credit too for the job he's done, because without an O-line holding things in place, the offense can't function. So it really does come down to the trenches at the end of the day. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they match up against a tough USC D-line.
Yeah, it's a USC defense that only gave up about 2.8 yards per carry over the final month of the season. So they're not giving up a whole lot defensively late in the season. Now, offensively, they're both very explosive offenses that average about 6.5 yards per play, tons of yardage on both sides, tons of points. So we're expecting a pretty explosive game here. Before we let you go, Tim, your thoughts about, I guess, this is the last game, so Vegas can't underestimate you anymore. So if Penn State wins another game with an underdog, They will have proven Vegas wrong for the entire season. It's just interesting, and that again, about a touchdown underdog against the USC team that seems pretty comparable. So to win the best conference, what's considered the best conference in college football, but to still turn around and be that kind of underdog, you're being disrespected once again.
It is at this point. We actually, the Penn State fan base actually revels in this, so we're glad. Please keep underestimating us, Vegas. We enjoy this proving you wrong thing every week. That being said, this is a very difficult matchup for Penn State. Like I said, USC's pretty good at shutting down the run. I imagine they're going to zero in on stopping Saquon Barkley, like all other teams have done this year. So in that case, it's going to be up to McSorley again to try, to continue working his magic for the passing game and trying to keep them honest with a few runs here and there. But really, I think the key is going to be whether Penn State's defense is able to get pressure on Sam Darnold. I mean, Darnold is the reason why USC is where they are now, because when they were playing Max Brown initially, who was their opening game starter, they looked pretty bad. I mean, they got blown out 52-6 by Alabama, and I think they started out 1-3. So just like Penn State, I mean, they had a very rough September, and I believe their fan base wanted to fire Clay Helton. They wanted to fire their coach too, just like a lot of Penn State fans were talking about firing Franklin. But neither team has lost since then, and so I mean it's going to be a matchup between probably the two hottest teams in college football right now, and it's to lose. But yeah, going back, Sam Darnold's getting pressure on him is going to be the key. I'm not so sure the Penn State D-line alone can do that. They're going to need some help from lots of blitzing from the linebackers. And I would imagine Brent Pry, defensive coordinators, got some probably drawing up all sorts of blitz packages to use. So they're going to have to throw him off his game, because if Darnold has time to sit there in the pocket, he's going to be able to pick Penn State apart.
Penn State and USC last lined up against each other in the 2009 Rose Bowl. That one not working out too well for the Nittany Lions, 38-24 in a battle of top 5 teams, and they get back at it on January 2nd. And of course, as we mentioned, USC a pretty formidable favorite at about 6.5 to 7 points, but Penn State has fooled the odds makers the entire season. Tim Aydin from Black Shoe Diaries on the SB Nation platform joining us. Tim, we always appreciate the breakdown.
No, thank you for having me, Mark.